is a place for all who suffer from kidney disease. No matter what stage you're at in your journey, we are here for you. KWM is a platform for kidney warriors to tell their personal story. KWM offers many ways to tell your story. Our Warriors Wall is a platform in which we allow the warrior to tell their story in a short blog format. Our warrior stories, we take your story and we place it on video, with voiceover telling your story. Do you have a message for all kidney warriors? We can give you a message of hope. You come on camera and speak your message of hope to other kidney warriors. Our final conversation starter is our line of Kidney Warrior merchandise. Go to www.kidneywarriormerch.com. KWM. Starting conversations.
Hey guys, welcome back to Hope with Jonathan, and I'm your host, Jonathan Traylor. Hey guys, I really appreciate all the support for the show. Really appreciate everyone for subscribing to the show. Appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Tonight, guys, we have a very, very special guest all the way from Waco, Texas, Victoria West, a 3-time kidney transplant recipient, suffered with polycystic kidney disease. And if you're not familiar with polycystic kidney disease, it's a disease that affects, of course, the kidneys. Poly meaning many or multiple, cystic meaning cyst, and polycystic kidney disease. And polycystic kidney disease, I'm gonna read from Google. Polycystic kidney disease causes numerous cysts to grow in the kidneys. These cysts are filled with fluid. If too many cysts grow, or if they get too big, the kidneys can become damaged. PKD cysts can slowly replace much of the kidneys, reducing kidney function and leading to kidney failure. So, guys, I know many patients that have suffered with polycystic kidney disease. Usually it involves a family history, but Victoria has a different story, and I want to bring her on tonight. Again, guys, she's located in Waco, Texas, and I'm right here in Kerrville, Texas, so shout out to Texas. We're repping Texas tonight. But really looking forward to her sharing her story tonight. It's going to be an amazing interview, guys. I hope you guys will interact with this and get involved and share this. And again, guys, smash the share button, guys. Go ahead and share this with all your friends and family. Also, if you haven't got a chance to subscribe to us, Hope with Jonathan over here on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to us. We'd really, really appreciate it. Again, guys, you can go over and check out our website as well at www.hopewithjonathan.com. But again, guys, appreciate all of the support for everyone tuning in tonight, and really looking forward to bringing on Victoria West all the way from Waco, Texas. Again, guys, hope you guys will enjoy this interview. Please, guys, get involved, engage, comment. Let us know you're here. Let us know where you're from. Really appreciate it. Again, guys, we're going to introduce Victoria West. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jonathan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. I'm blessed to be here. I'm rocking life right now with a kidney transplant, so I'm definitely blessed to be here.
That's awesome. Yeah, that definitely gives you a second life, doesn't it?
It surely does. It surely does. So, Victoria, why don't you take an opportunity to go ahead and introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I am from Waco, Texas. I am married. I have one little boy, my miracle baby. He's 7 years old. I'm 33 years old, and I have had polycystic kidney disease and chronic kidney failure since I was 10 years old. I have had 3 transplants, and I've been on dialysis 4 different times in my life. So that's really the gist of it. I guess I can,
Wow.
talk a little bit about what that experience was like. I know that, like you said, there's a lot of patients that suffer from polycystic kidney disease, but mine has been a little bit different from some of the other patients that I have met with PKD.
Yeah, usually it entails, family members, mom, dad, brother, sister, just all kind of different aspects where I've seen it kind of go down the line of, many different family members. So, but you say you have a little bit different of a story. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So when I was about 9.5, 10 years old, I started to lose weight really rapidly. Never had any other health problems or anything like that. But I lost a lot of weight where my parents and my grandparents thought that I was just going through a growth spurt. Then I became tired all the time, couldn't really eat, nauseous. And when I was about 10 years old, they took me to my primary care physician who did some blood work and said, I think you might have kidney failure, and sent me to a specialist at Cook's Children's in Fort Worth, Texas. The nephrologist there did do a lot of other testing, and they found that I had polycystic kidney disease, where, as you described it, my kidneys were actually covered in cysts that had grown so large that my kidneys had started to fail. Now, normally this disease doesn't affect a patient until they're later on in life. They don't start seeing the effects of kidney failure until their adulthood. For me, I was actually very young. And so the doctors did say, you're still really young. Your kidneys are still working at a good percentage. It may be 20, 30 years before you need dialysis. It shouldn't happen right away. So I went back probably about 6, 7 months later for a checkup. And within that 6 months period, my kidneys had gone from 35, 40% function to less than 10 within 6 months, which is very rapid for polycystic kidney disease. Like I said, it's a very slow acting disease. And what was different for me is that I did not have any family members with this disease. I did not have any family members with kidney failure at all. Diabetes, high blood pressure, heart conditions do run in my family, but at that age, I didn't have any of those problems. My mother, father, sister, grandparents, nobody had ever had kidney failure. My father did pass away at a very young age. He passed away at 26. And so the only idea that we could have is that maybe he might have been a carrier, but he passed away too young for us to know that, because he had not been diagnosed before he passed.
Wow.
Yeah, so for me, it was a lot different. It kind of hit us out of nowhere, and where most people get diagnosed and then say, okay, within, by the time they're in their 30s or their 40s, they may need dialysis. I needed dialysis within 6 months of my diagnosis. So I started dialysis at 10.5 years old.
My God, that's 10.5 years old starting dialysis. So what was that like as a 10.5-year-old kid?
Well, for me, I guess I had an excellent support system. My grandparents raised me and took care of me. My mother was there to help with going to treatments and things like that. I did start off with peritoneal dialysis. And because there were no juvenile nephrologists anywhere near Waco, we would have to go to Dallas, Fort Worth,
Yeah.
to see my nephrologist. So I did do peritoneal for about 3 years at home, and then we would go back and forth to Cook's for my checkups and everything. But within that last year, I got peritonitis a good 6 or 7 times, which, and for anybody who doesn't know, peritonitis is a bacterial infection that you get with peritoneal dialysis that actually affects your peritoneum, which is the sac that kind of holds all of your intestines and everything together. And bacteria can get in through the peritoneal catheter, and that's how you get that infection. And I got that infection 6 or 7 times within a year. to the point that the nurse actually thought I was faking it just to get out of going to school. So,
Oh, wow.
so I mean, we were very careful, we were very clean and everything, but it just didn't work for me. So, they suggested hemodialysis when I was 12 years old, and the only clinic that I could do hemodialysis at that was closest to me as a child was at Breckenridge Children's Hospital in Austin, Texas, which is about a 2.5 hour drive from Waco.
Yeah.
So we did do that. My mother or my grandparents would take me to dialysis 3 days a week. Usually Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. We would wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, head to Austin, start dialysis by 7:30 in the morning, and then finish around noon and come home. And I'd go to school on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and do dialysis on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So that was really difficult. I did get lucky enough that I actually had a distant cousin who was only about a year older than me, and he was on dialysis as well for a completely different reason. He'd had an infection that settled in his kidneys. It was not related to my disease. But he was a year older than me and doing dialysis as well. So I would usually stay the weekends with his family in Austin so that my mom could have a break from driving so much and then still do school during the week.
So what was it like interacting with other kids? Like, did they ask questions, or were they aware of your condition?
I was not very shy about my condition at all. To me, it was just something that happened. It's just something that I lived with, and I didn't really know any different. So I was never shy about it. I remember in elementary school, after I was diagnosed and they put me on peritoneal and I had the catheter in my stomach, I took all my little girlfriends into the bathroom and I was like, look what I've got.
Yeah.
But, for me, it was just, I didn't really know the difference. So I was never really shy about it.
Yeah.
I did get self-conscious about it as I went into high school, because of my fistula, and my fistula did develop aneurysms like many fistulas do. So it was like bumpy and there's this giant scar on my arm. So there were times where I would just wear long sleeve shirts just to cover it up, or I'd always have on like a wristband or something like that. But I mean, for the most part, I wasn't shy about it. They knew what was going on. They knew what I had to do. And I don't think I ever really let it slow me down. I never really let it change it, other than the fact that I was obviously tired all the time. I was, always kind of feeling weak and fatigued and everything. And there were days when I would miss school. And at one point I did have to do like homeschool for a while because I just didn't have the strength to go. But other than that, I never let it slow me down. I never let it stop me from, sharing my experience with my friends and my family. I've always been very open to talking about it.
Well, that's awesome. Some people look at their disability as, their life's over and they go crawl in a shell, and, they just don't want people to know. But you obviously looked at it completely differently and in a positive way. So that's awesome. Not to let it stop you.
I think that, one of the reasons why I didn't let it stop me is because I was so young. I say this all the time, but I don't feel sorry for myself. I've never questioned why did this happen to me, because it's all I've ever known. What I feel sorry for is the patients that have lived a long, healthy, normal life, and then this disease hits them out of nowhere and they have to completely change their lifestyle to live with it. That has got to be hard. That has got to be hard, to live your whole life completely normal, and then something like this, just life altering, happens to you. For me, I've always known it, but for someone coming into it as an adult, it's got to be really difficult to change your life that way.
Yeah. You're looking at one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kidney disease, and everything. So it was definitely a life altering event. So
Yeah, it does.
but
I've met many patients that it's changed their life completely.
But we've got a couple people watching and some people chiming in. So really appreciate everybody's support out there. We'd really appreciate if you guys would share, drop a comment, let us know that you're here, let your voice be heard. But again, guys, Shane Blanchard, all the way from Iowa. He's my buddy. Shane needs a kidney donor over on Facebook. Also, he's involved with Midwest Kidney Warriors. But I appreciate Shane's support for watching the show tonight. But he had a question. Said, did you have a fistula at a young age?
I was 12 years old when I got my fistula. I have had it for 20 years, 21 years, and it finally failed about 3 weeks ago. It just gave up on me.
Wow.
Yeah. I've
Yeah,
never had any problems with it or anything. It's always worked perfectly, even between 3 transplants and going years without dialysis. It always worked perfectly until about a year ago. I started having some trouble. They did a corrective surgery on it, and then I got transplanted here in January, and it stopped working just a few weeks ago.
yeah. I've still got mine. Mine's on my lower wrist right here, on my left wrist right here. And I haven't decided to do anything with it. I don't know if I'm just going to leave it alone and let it, do its own thing or go get it reversed or whatever. But I'm like, I don't want any other surgeries. I'm like, I've had plenty of surgeries and pokes and all this stuff. And I think I'm just kind of done with it. So.
Yeah, for
I,
me, it was a lot of back then when I first started dialysis, that wasn't an option. They didn't tell me, oh, you can get it reversed. You don't need it anymore. You have a transplant now.
yeah.
And in a way, thank God that they didn't, because, when my transplant did fail, I didn't have to have another fistula put in or anything like that. I just kept going with the one that was working.
Yeah. So Shane wanted to know about how your treatments went with that fistula and having, being so young and how they were able to develop a fistula with, like such small veins when you're younger.
Yeah.
How well did your treatments go?
My treatments always went really well. I remember getting my fistula surgery, and I did have the permacath in my chest for a couple of weeks. And, they had me build it up. They sent me home with stress balls. I think I still have a stress ball from Cook's Children's somewhere. Um, and so they just had, like pump the stress ball and build those veins up. And I never had any problems.
Mm-hmm.
With my fistula, like I said, up until about a year ago is when I started having a lot of trouble with it.
Yeah. I remember the stress ball. They give me that in as well when I was in center, and I would sit there the whole time while I was doing treatment and just when I had the central line in my chest and my fistula was still maturing, I would sit there and pump the stress ball the whole time during dialysis session. But it was kind of a way to get rid of some anxiety as well while I was sitting
Yeah.
there on the machine.
Yeah.
But
I wanted to get it working as soon as possible because, man, that chest catheter is annoying.
yeah,
That
it
thing.
is. Yeah, it is. Not only is it can be dangerous, because of risk of infection and all that, it just for body image and things like that. I mean, you got this tube hanging out of your chest, and it's just kind of like there's really no way to really conceal it. I mean, it's just kind of
There's
there,
not.
and
I
yeah,
still
and
have the scars from several of the ones that I've had, and I'm just like,
yeah,
well, it's something that I went through, but
yeah,
it itched so bad. Mine was
yeah.
always real itchy.
So I had the IJ in my neck, and then they converted that into a permacath. In the hospital when I had emergency kidney failure. I woke up with this monstrosity of tubing and stuff all in my neck. As a matter of fact, I could barely even move my neck. I mean, it was just like really, really protruding out there. And when they converted it to the permacath and all that, everything got a little bit better. But of course, I was schooled on it right away from my in-center dialysis at DaVita. They were like, you got to get the fistula right away. You want to get rid of that in your chest because of the risk of blood infection and
Yeah.
all this type of thing. So fistula about 2 months after I was in center, I think, and then it matured. And They started using it. They started with the baby needles, of course, the smaller
Yeah.
gauge needles, and progressing to the 15. I think it's a 15 gauge needle or something like that they use. And anyway, I progressed to home hemodialysis later on and got out of dialysis center right around COVID time last year, or in 2020. It was in March of 2020, and I trained with my wife and everything, but I ended up with buttonholes. So I got rid of doing the
Oh,
sharps. Yeah, and I did the blunt needles in my buttonholes, and it was pretty successful. Kind of a crazy story. As soon as my as soon as we started with home hemo, I started having problems with I think it was my venous, and
yeah.
I had made an appointment to go in and see the vascular surgeon to possibly have this thing cleaned out or whatever it needed to happen with it, because something was going on with it. It was causing a lot of high numbers and stuff like that on the machine, and ultimately I got the call for transplant. And so the day before I was going in to see the vascular surgeon, I actually it was the day of that I was scheduled to go in. I ended up in the hospital getting my transplant, so I didn't have to even
Wow.
mess with it. Yeah, it was crazy. It really
So
was. It was
do
crazy.
you still have a thrill in your fistula now?
Oh yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
See,
yeah. If I put it up to my ear and if I lay it on my pillow at night,
you can still feel it.
it's oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, with my fistula, so I developed aneurysms pretty quickly, like those big bumps that you see on fistulas. And it's still I could still had a thrill even when I had my first transplant for 10 years. I've always had a thrill, and then I woke up one day about 3 or 4 weeks ago and I couldn't feel it anymore and it was hurting and the aneurysms were really hard to the touch. And
Yeah,
went and had an ultrasound done and they were like, yeah, it's completely clogged. And they decided not to do surgery because it wasn't affecting me anymore, and it after a couple of days it stopped hurting. So now
yeah,
I can't. It's so weird to not have the thrill there that I've had for 20 something years.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're concerned about it, maybe you should follow up, I guess, with a vascular surgeon or something to check it
Yeah,
out.
I
But
I talked to the surgeon that did my repair surgery back in like November.
yeah,
Um, and he said that it wasn't a concern at this point unless it started to bother me. Then I would need to
right.
come in and they might have to do like a angioplasty or something, or close it off.
So, uh, so we're gonna fast forward a little bit. You've been a three-time kidney transplant recipient. So why don't you tell us about how you got your first transplant?
Okay. So I was at 15 years old. I'd done peritoneal dialysis for 3 years. I'd been on hemo for about a year and a half. When I was 14, a little bit older, my grandfather kind of went in and said, you know what, this going back and forth to Austin for dialysis, it's too much on us. So he actually convinced one of our local clinics here in Waco to take me as a juvenile patient. So I was the first juvenile patient at the clinics, the Fresenius clinics here in Waco. And when they took me, they got me listed at the Texas Transplant Institute in San Antonio. And I waited about a year and a half after being on dialysis here in Waco. And at 15, I got my first transplant. And so it was a cadaver. Um, you know, they obviously didn't tell me a whole lot. I know that she was 16 years old, and I was told that she was a suicide patient. I never
Oh,
I never pursued it. I never pursued the story. I never went out and tried to reach out to her family. I think at one point they told me that they didn't want any contact. But I know that she was my age. She was a little bit older than me, and that she had committed suicide. And that's how I got a kidney. So I don't know if that information has ever been shared, but I mean, it's a very hard way to receive a second chance at life at such a young age.
sure.
Um, and
And
so I did have, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna mention, yeah, that's got to be tough for the family to deal with, and that's probably why they wanted to remain anonymous or didn't want
Yeah.
any contact. Just bring up too many bad, hard feelings, and very depressing for them to have to deal with that, on a reoccurring basis. So, but hey, you mentioned Texas Transplant Institute. That's where I got my kidney transplant. Was it?
In San Antonio?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's still Texas Transplant Institute, or Methodist Specialty in Transplant, is what it's called, and
Yes.
that's where I got my kidney transplant. They have an amazing team. They do a lot of transplants there,
Yes.
and they're a top program. I've really had a great experience with them, and so that's awesome. That's awesome. So, what ultimately went on with the transplant that it ended up failing for you ultimately?
So I was very young when I received that transplant, and like most young patients, I thought, "Oh, I've got a second chance at life. Let me go drink Coke and eat pizza, and do what I want to do." And so I'll admit that the first few years, as a teenager, I didn't take care of that kidney the way that I should have. Ultimately, my kidney did last for a total of 10 years. Um, I'm going to tell a story that's very hard for me to tell, but
Take your time.
when I was 19, um, I had always been told that I would never have children. And it wasn't that I could not have children, it was that it would be too risky. Which I knew, but they never told me that. They just said you can't have children, as if not even giving me a choice. So when I was 19 and I met my husband, I decided that I eventually wanted to have kids. I was obviously too young at that point, but at some point I want to have children. And so I went to my nephrologist and I told them, I said, I want to have kids one day. What do I need to do to get to that point? And they did not think that was a good idea. So me being the stubborn patient that I am, I went and found another doctor. And the doctor that I found was out of Temple, Texas, and at Scott and White, and he actually would come and do clinic in Waco a couple times a week. So I started seeing him, and when I was 25, I got pregnant. Found that I was pregnant on our honeymoon, and I lost that baby on Thanksgiving Day, and that was kind of a wake-up call for me. It was, well, it can happen. It is possible. Now you've got to take care of business. So after that, the doctors changed my medication after the miscarriage and put me on a anti-rejection medication that was going to be safer for pregnancy since I was planning on it. And I got pregnant with my son in April of 2013. I probably actually got pregnant like in February, but I waited a while to take a pregnancy test. And anyway, so I did do dialysis during the pregnancy because at that point my kidney was already failing. I was overweight, my diabetes was out of control, my blood pressure was out of control, and then I got pregnant. And against a few doctors' wishes, I decided to keep the baby. A few doctors told me it wasn't a good idea, that I should probably have an abortion, that I wasn't going to survive, and if I did survive, my baby wasn't going to survive. But
Wow.
I had prayed for this for so long, and so I said I'm going to do it anyway. I'm already pregnant. It's too late now. So I did, and because the transplant was already failing, I did dialysis for 4 days a week, 4.5-hour treatments for majority of the pregnancy. And because I was so high risk, the clinic here in Waco wouldn't take me. So I did go to the Scott and White Clinic in Temple, which, like I said, is a 45-minute drive from here.
Yeah.
So while working a full-time job and fully pregnant, I would either my mom or my husband or another family member would drive me to dialysis 45 minutes away. I would do my treatment there in Temple and head back, get home about 9:30, 10 o'clock, get up and go to work the next day. And I did that for a few months during the pregnancy. My son was born on October 22nd, and he was born at exactly 30 weeks to the day, to the minute. He was born at 30 weeks, so he was 10 weeks early, but perfectly healthy, other than being just, a preemie and his lungs being a little underdeveloped. He was absolutely perfect and completely healthy. And he is 7 years old now. And like I said, he's my miracle. And perfectly healthy. I mean, a perfectly healthy, very smart, very active little boy. And there are times when I want to take a picture of him and send him to that doctor that told me to abort him and just say, look what I did.
Oh, you
So
should. You should.
I
You
never did,
should.
but
And, because look, I'm a person of faith, so I definitely believe that, in divine intervention. And
yes.
I definitely believe that God has a plan for us. And he definitely had a plan for you and
Yeah.
your son being born. And, sometimes we just have to trust the process. Even though we don't understand. But I am blown away at your strength that you were, you were on dialysis while you were pregnant, and then continuing to work and go through all of that. I mean, it had to have been just mentally draining for you. And I'm not sure about your support. I know you talked about your family, you had a strong support system, but at that point in time, like, where was your strength coming from?
It was the baby. It was him.
Yeah.
I was doing it for him. I was doing it for my husband. I mean, I never, like I said, I've never questioned why this happened to me, and I've never let it slow me down. But once I got pregnant, that was it. I mean, I didn't have a choice. I was gonna do this. And the fact that someone told me that I couldn't do it made me do it even more. Made me want to just prove someone that, look, I can do this. I can be a mother. I can have a baby regardless of what everyone had told me. And maybe that wasn't the right way to look at it. Maybe it wasn't the safest way to look at it, but that's where I got my strength, because I had done something and I was going to see it through. And let me tell you, if anything in my story was worth it, it was worth it. It was worth the long days, the long nights. It was worth the pain. It was worth every single second.
Yeah,
Every single second.
absolutely. It's
And, yeah, after he was born, they told me that my kidney was already failing and that it was going to fail eventually, which it did. Um, but again, 100% worth it. Worth
yeah.
every second.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. It's a beautiful story. It really is. And I commend you for holding strong to what you knew in your heart was the right thing to do. And that's awesome. So ultimately, so you say your first kidney ended up failing. You ended up, going back on dialysis. What ended up
yeah.
happening that you ended up getting a second transplant?
So after my son was born, I did have to go back on dialysis, and that's when I started doing home hemo. So I started home hemo um, when my son was about 3 or 4 months old, and so here I am with a little bitty baby at home doing dialysis and having that hemo machine and having the needles in my arm with a brand new baby in my arm trying to feed him while connected to the machine. Um, and I actually only waited about 8 months for my transplant, for my second transplant. So he was born in October. I started dialysis again in December, and I got transplanted with my second transplant in June of 2014. So I was only on the waiting list about 8 months, and it was a cadaver. It was not a family member or anything like that. It was a cadaver.
Okay.
So that second transplant, I mean, I'm incredibly blessed. I have met many people who have been on waiting lists for decades and
Right.
have waited for transplants forever.
Right.
And every time that I have received one of my 3 transplants, my wait was not very long, in
Okay.
comparison to other people that I've talked to. So I only waited 8 months for a transplant, for my second transplant. And that time I tried to do better about taking care of myself and, taking my medicine like I was supposed to. And I wasn't perfect. I'll admit that. I was never perfect, but the kidney only failed after about 4.5 years. So my second kidney failed in 2019, January 2019.
Where did you have the transplant at, the second one?
The second one was at Scott and White and Temple. They listed me after I delivered my son. They listed me immediately.
Okay.
So yeah, the second one was at Scott and White and Temple.
Okay. So it seems like that the common theme that you were losing the transplants was because maybe you weren't following a diet, possibly, or what was the common theme of the reasons why you were? Was it the polycystic kidney disease continuing to come back or reoccurring?
No, PKD did not affect my transplant kidneys because PKD, from my understanding, is not transferable. So my transplants failed on their own. Now, obviously, the first one failed. I was overweight. It did last 10 years, which is a pretty good lifetime for a kidney transplant, and probably would have lasted much longer had I taken better care of myself and probably if I hadn't had a baby. The pregnancy was what was too much for that first kidney transplant. And ultimately, that's what caused my transplant to fail after 10 years. The second one, like I said, I was not a perfect patient. I did take my medication, but I didn't follow a diet the way I should have. I, didn't take my insulin the way I should have. And diabetes hit me at 17. So it came after kidney failure, whereas most patients, diabetes is what causes their kidney failure.
Right.
So no, I was not perfect with my second transplant, but ultimately they could not tell me what caused it to fail. Right. They did do a biopsy after it failed, and they did show some scarring from the diabetes, but they told me that it was not enough scarring for it to have failed as quickly as it did. Yeah. And the doctors, kind of mentioned that maybe I had some other sort of autoimmune disease. And they did test for a lot of different autoimmune diseases like lupus and a few others. But from what they told me, 2 different doctors told me that it's possible that I have some type of other autoimmune disease that's underlying to PKD, which is why my kidney originally would have failed so quickly as a child, because PKD is so slow acting. If I had another undetected disease underneath that, might have pushed my kidney failure along, and then ultimately might have even caused my second transplant to fail so quickly. However, they never could find any result of another autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
So for one thing, they waited to do a biopsy until after I'd already lost the kidney. So by that point, it was too late for them to tell what could have caused it. If they'd done a biopsy before it failed, they might have been able to see a progression of something. But because I didn't have the biopsy done until after the kidney failed, they really couldn't tell me for sure this is what caused it. They did run lots of different blood work and test me for different autoimmune diseases, but nothing came back significant. And so ultimately, I was told that it's possible I have an autoimmune disease that just wasn't detected and that is not commonly tested for. So I don't really know why the second one failed. I probably didn't help it, but I don't know why it failed.
Right. I mean, sometimes people take care of themselves and the kidney just ultimately decides to reject for whatever reason. And, we don't know why. And a lot of times people think that it's because the person's not taking care of themselves, and that's not entirely true. I mean, people can take care of themselves and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the kidney just decides to reject or whatever, whatever the cause is. And it happens. I've actually seen and read stories about people's, kidneys just rejecting for whatever reason or failing. But we got a quick question here. What's your blood type, by the way? I have someone here that's interested in wondering what's your blood type, if it was AB.
I'm B positive.
B positive.
Yeah.
Okay. And because of all the transplants, and I'm sure maybe around along the way you may have had possibly some blood transfusions. I don't know. Uh,
Yes.
do you
Um,
have a high PRA, which is panel reactive antibodies?
yes, actually, I have significantly high,
Yeah.
significantly high. I have had two pregnancies. I've had several blood transfusions, and with two different transplants before this one, um, I was at the top of the list. Like my
Yeah.
PRA was very, very high, and I was told at that when I was listed for my third transplant, they told me, they said, it's going to be hard. They said, you're going to probably wait 10 plus years for a transplant
Wow.
unless you get a donor.
Yeah.
Which the only person in my family who would have been a match would be my sister. And she couldn't donate when I was younger, obviously, but she's a younger sister. Couldn't donate as a child.
Yeah.
And so with my third transplant, she went to get tested, and they told her, she didn't meet the criteria. She had some things that she had to take care of before she would be able to do that.
Right.
But luckily, I actually got transplanted before she even had to worry about going through any of that.
Right.
But yeah, so I do have a really high PRA, and I was listed nationally because of that. So I'm sure you've probably talked about this before, but when you have a high PRA, you can be listed in different categories. So you can be listed by your region, which, for instance, I would be in the DFW region. You can be listed by the state if your PRA is a little bit higher, and then you can also be listed nationally if your PRA is like really high, which mine was.
Yeah.
So I did. I got listed nationally in December of 2019 and was transplanted in January of 2021.
So you just got a transplant in 2021.
Yep.
Was it at Baylor Scott too?
No, this one was actually at Medical City, Dallas.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Medical City, Dallas. So with the high PRA and all of that, and the history of two other transplants, like then they were telling you it's going to be a long wait. You still ultimately ended up getting a third transplant. So where do you know where this one came from, or did you get a deceased donor or a living donor, or how did it work out for you?
It was another cadaver.
Okay.
And almost unheard of, it came from California. Um, So typically, when a kidney transplant comes in, they try to give it to someone in that region or in that same state. Because
Mm-hmm.
I was such a high PRA, this kidney became available, and it was a relatively good match for me. My
Mm-hmm.
doctors went back and forth on, do we take this kidney for her because it's coming all the way from California? It's going to have a really long cold time. um, is it worth transplanting someone all the way in Texas? But because I was going to be such a hard match, it was like a 1 in a million chance that this kidney became available for me. So they did. My doctors accepted it from California. It was flight lifted the next morning. So I got the call, um, I want to say on December 29th. No, I got the call on December 30th. Got the call on December 30th. And they told me that I would need to be there the next day, the 31st. So I got there New Year's Eve, and they didn't transplant me until the following morning. So I got transplanted on January 1st. And
Wow.
because that kidney came all the way from California, for some people who don't know out there, once they remove an organ from a deceased person, it either has to be immediately transplanted or kept alive, or they put it on ice, which
Right.
they did send it. I get they from what I understand, they kept it alive as long as they could until it could be flight lifted to me the next day, and then it was cold all the way here from California,
Right.
and I didn't get transplanted until very late that night. Ultimately, the next morning.
Yeah.
So um, it did take a while to wake up.
Right.
Once I received it, it took about a week or two to officially wake up.
Right. Yeah. I ended up getting direct donated from Louisville, Kentucky, all the way to San Antonio. And
Wow.
I actually knew my donor. He had passed away, unfortunately, sadly, but he was a donor. He was a registered donor, and they were able to direct donate to me, and they sent his kidney from Kentucky on an airplane all the way to San Antonio. And I'm not sure how long the kidney had been out of his body. I don't think it was any longer than 24 hours, and they put it right into me. And but like you said, it was a little bit sleepy. It took a couple of days to
Yeah.
really get good and functioning in my body and everything. And I had to spend a couple of extra days in the hospital because of it. But because they told me, you'll be in here maybe 2 3 days. I was in there about 6 or 7. I was in there about a week,
Yeah.
ultimately. But
I was in with this third transplant, I was in the hospital for 3 weeks because it did take so long to wake up. And then I got home, started working great, and went back for my follow up 4 days later and had COVID. So,
oh, oh
and
no.
then I got hospitalized again because I was so fresh out of transplant. They didn't want the COVID to affect me. They wanted to keep an eye on me the whole time, which I'm very lucky that my COVID experience was not very severe. I needed oxygen for a couple of days. I had a fever, had some headaches, but other than that, I did not have a really bad case of COVID. Um, so I was ultimately in the hospital for like a month with
You,
the transplant and then COVID.
you don't have to answer this, if you don't want to. But was you possibly vaccinated before you went in and had this third transplant?
No, no. That was actually I had not been vaccinated.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to say, because when did the vaccine even come out? It didn't come
I
out
I
until
actually
like,
I got vaccinated in 2021 in February. It was around February when I got my first
okay.
one,
So
Moderna.
yeah, so it didn't I didn't get vaccinated right away.
Yeah.
I had not been vaccinated yet. I was planning on getting vaccinated, but then they called me for the transplant. And sorry, I cut out for a second. They called me
It's
for the
okay.
transplant, and I went in and I actually caught COVID while in the hospital.
Oh.
So I had to have
Oh
gotten it
well.
from a nurse or something. So I caught COVID while in the hospital. Then I came home, and I was home for about 4 days, and then I go back in on Monday for my follow up, and I was running a low grade fever. So they said, we're going to go ahead and test you. And sure enough, I had COVID. And then doctors told me to wait 3 months post transplant to get vaccinated. And I ended up waiting 6 months. So I've just recently got vaccinated.
Yeah.
But I waited 6 months because I had heard horror stories. And if you've looked at the statistics, they're showing that immunosuppressed patients are not reacting to the antibodies obviously the same way that a normal patient would. So
Right.
even fully vaccinated, we who are immunosuppressed are still at higher risk of catching COVID again.
Yeah.
So
I think I think what it is if you do contract it with the vaccine, will have a greater chance of survival, especially if you're immune suppressed.
right,
With the vaccination. But I just wondered if you had gotten the vaccination before you had went in for transplant, but it was just a kind of a spur of a moment question since you had said you contracted COVID. But
yeah,
makes sense though. You got it in the hospital, which I'm sure COVID is just lingering probably somewhere in the hospital somewhere, or a
right. And
possibility that
they tested me before going back for surgery. They did a rapid COVID test before I got transplanted. And then, the problems that I was having, they kept telling me was a result of the medication. And so I
yeah
really don't know if, like the bowel problems I was having, the aches and pains I was having could have been COVID related, or it could have just been related to me just now having a transplant and starting anti-rejection medications again.
Yeah.
So I don't really know. I did not feel, my husband has had it. A few of my other family members have had it, and I don't feel like, compared to what I have heard, I don't feel like I had a very bad experience with COVID. I just got really lucky. Honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I would say you're a pretty blessed person. Number one, with 3 transplants and, and the PRA level, because I know some patients that have the high PRA level, and they're told it's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard road to find a donor. And one of them's actually watching the show, Shane Blanchard.
Yeah, I know Shane.
Also,
Hi, Shane.
yeah. And there's some others. Chris Ann Hernandez, she has a high PRA level. I think she's at like 100%, and she's still waiting. And there's many others out there that have high PRA levels, and they're told it's like a needle in a haystack. That's going to be hard to find that perfect match. But you're definitely a best person. You have an amazing story and amazing positive mindset. Like Shane says, PMA, I think it's positive mental attitude. And so it's definitely an inspiring story. But what's life like now for you, now that you're you'll be a year post in January, so you're doing well so far.
Yeah. And there's been a couple of bumps in the road, but everything's great. I am no longer on insulin. I am still taking diabetic medication, but I don't have to do insulin anymore. I'm no longer on blood pressure medication. I was on 3 or 4 blood pressure medications at one point, and I am not on any now.
Yeah.
I have maintained the weight loss for the most part. Obviously, my appetite came back after transplant, so I gained a few extra pounds.
Yeah.
But I feel great enough to work out again. I do yoga a lot, and I just started, working out again a lot. Having to take a little break right now because I actually gave myself a hernia.
Oh, no.
I guess I started working out too soon, or I must have lifted something too quickly, and I gave myself a hernia, and it's gotten pretty big. So I'm actually supposed to have surgery on that soon. But I have, I do have, my energy level is just, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like night and day,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, mine too. I'm bouncing off the walls. I'm actually driving everybody at the house crazy because they were so used to me just kind of sitting around the house, and now I'm like go go go. I mean, I'm walking all the time. 4 to 5 miles when I go walk. I ride a mountain bike. I'm doing all these extra things that I used to not be able to do, or I didn't do with the level of energy that I have now. So I think I kind of get on their nerves with all the energy that I have, but it's a good thing. It's a great feeling. And much like you, I was on 3 blood pressure medications as well at one time, some pretty strong ones. I think nifedipine being one of my strongest ones that
Me
I
too.
was on.
Yeah.
And they took me off of all of that. My blood pressure has been really amazing. And, my diabetes, my A1C, my last one was a 6, and which pretty good for me. You're talking about a person that my A1C sometimes were off the charts high. I think at one time my A1C was like a 13 or something crazy. So
I've been there. At one point my A1C was like a 12, and now it's at 6.8. So that's a lot. That's better for me.
Exactly. It's definitely better for me. And I'm not saying that occasionally I may not eat something that I want to enjoy something, but I've learned to have accountability. And if I eat a sweet, tonight, then I won't eat any sweets for the next 2 or 3 days, because I just want to make sure that I'm keeping my sugar levels in great reading. And I'm actually finding out that you can have some sweets as long as you're doing something on the backside to try to get rid of it, like
yes,
exercise and all that type of stuff. So.
The walking and exercising really does help. Yeah, it really does. My grandmother doesn't take diabetic medication anymore because she goes and walks several miles. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's that people don't realize that, but exercise really does help with your A1C.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think last night before I went and walked, just to give you guys an example, my sugar was like 170. And when I took my walk, I came back and my sugar had dropped all the way down to 100, which is amazing. That's like 70 points. And, it's just, that's just the difference is if you're active and you get the blood circulating and the blood flowing, it really helps with the sugar levels. And man, I wish I would have done it when I was in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
But you can't go back, but you can definitely look forward to the future and try to help others. And that's why we're here sharing our incredible stories and journeys. And Victoria West, you definitely have an incredible story, an incredible journey. I feel like I need to bring you back so that we can talk about more of your story, maybe a part 2 later on.
I would love
You
to
got
do that.
And real quick before we head out off the show, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing with your Facebook page, Texas Kidney Warriors.
Yeah, so I've actually wanted to do it for quite a while. When I lost my kidney transplant this last time in 2019, I had to stop working and I'm just sitting at home twiddling my thumbs, and I really wanted something to keep me occupied. And I've always been someone to share my story and want to talk to people and share my experience and hear their stories. And so I belong to a few different Facebook groups on social media. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. So a few weeks ago, I started my Facebook support group for kidney failure patients called Texas Kidney Warriors. And we've got a few members now, but I'm really trying to build that momentum. My goal with that is really just to offer emotional support, patient to patient support. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, but like I told you, if anyone's gone through it, I've probably gone through it too. And if I haven't yet, I probably will eventually. So I just really like to offer support um, and talk to people, hear their stories, share with them what my experience has been, because there really isn't a whole lot of patient to patient support out there. So um, I'm starting out just based in Texas, and most of my members are based in Texas as well, but I'm open to anyone. So anyone wants to join my group, I'm going to start trying to do live videos and create more content there just to kind of build momentum and get more people involved and
Right.
sharing my story.
Yeah.
And I really, really admire what you and Shane and Sam, Mr. Kidney, is doing. You guys really inspire me. So I'm just hoping that I can kind of inspire someone too.
I really appreciate that. And you're a walking, living testimony. And, I really appreciate you coming on, doing the show and what you're doing with the advocacy. And guys, again, you can check out our group page at Texas Kidney Warriors over on Facebook. Where else can we find you? Are you on Facebook, Instagram? I mean, what other social media platforms are you on?
Right now, it's just Facebook. I really had taken a break from social media for a while until I decided to start this group. And so just a few weeks ago, I got back on Facebook. Um, I am hoping, like I said, to start creating some content. I'm not sure if that's going to be through YouTube or a podcast or anything like that. For now, it's probably just going to be Facebook. But Texas Kidney
Awesome.
Warriors, you can join the group. You can message me anytime. I've actually made a lot of new friends through that group, and we've been able to have video conferences and phone calls and just share their story and offer experience and offer advice for anyone going through this, really. I mean, whether you're a patient, you're a loved one, you're a caregiver, um, it's good to get the word out there, and it's good to talk about it, because that's the kind of support you
Sure.
need, is someone who's been through it before.
Sure. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, support is crucial when you're battling, a chronic illness such as kidney disease, no matter which, whatever it is, polycystic kidney disease or lupus or IgAN or whatever you're going through that, has caused your kidney disease. It's definitely, support is crucial.
Yeah.
And you definitely need it. And, kidney disease is a tough battle for many to fight. And like you mentioned earlier, there's many warriors out there that have been doing dialysis for many years. I had a lady in my center that's been doing dialysis for like 20 years.
Yeah.
which is, I find incredibly insane. It's like, wow, how in the world did they deal with that? It's tough, but obviously, they had a strong mental mindset and must have had strong support, and that's the way you can really get through it. And whether you're finding it through your local church or community or friends and family, but definitely you don't want to face it alone. And Facebook groups can be helpful and beneficial, and so it's definitely awesome that you're doing that. Again, Victoria West, guys, go check out the Facebook page, Facebook group, Texas Kidney Warriors. And again, I really appreciate everyone for chiming in. Also, want to send a special shout out to Jared Brown, the Warriors Quest Show. He actually had sent me Victoria's information. So shout out to Jared Brown. He actually showed up for the Midwest Kidney Warriors. Appreciate you showing up, brother. Appreciate you supporting us. My mom, Vicky Love. Shout out to mom. Appreciate you, mom, for watching tonight. And man, there's so many people that are supporting the show. Really appreciate you guys. You know who you are. God bless you guys. And again, if you hadn't had opportunity to subscribe to us, please subscribe to us. And Victoria, I also want to encourage you, let you know that you can start a podcast. It's really easy to do. And if you need any assistance at all, if you need any help or assistance, just reach out to some of us. We'd be happy to help you get started and give you pointers and tips and all of that great stuff. So just let us know what you want to do, and we'll be willing to help you.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, again, guys, this has been another great interview with Hope with Jonathan. Hope you are inspired by this story tonight. And again, guys, really appreciate all the support. You guys stay safe out there. Remember to take care of your kidneys. God bless you.